Thanks very much. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of efficiency going on in the world of energy savings, and Kringle Daly is also interested in efficiency. His kind of efficiency is for the medical world, and he helps people fail faster. Kringle, you want to tell them about that?
All right, so hello, my name's Kryngle Daly, and I actually wanted to start with a quick adage because of something Jim brought up. So you used Bose as an example, right? So my father actually works for Bose. He's one of the design engineers for their professional sound systems. And I just wanted to bring up the car. Yeah. Do you know how the car started and how far they got that technology?
I don't. I just know that they have it.
The car, right. So the car started because Dr. Bose owned a sports car and a Cadillac. And anyone who's ever driven down Route 9 in Framingham, you know a sports car is the wrong car to drive on that road. So he pulled up to Bose one day and said, why doesn't my sports car drive like a Cadillac? So they started developing this technology. Yeah. They developed it to the point where you could drive at a 2x4 standing the long way up, holding a full glass of water, and the car would hop over the 2x4 without knocking the 2x4 over and without spilling the water. Like
it's amazing.
It's
I've
incredible.
Seen that video
Yeah, it just, and the water is just, and it was worse than Jurassic Park, right? So, anywho, so I am a PhD biophysicist with 25 years of computer programming experience. I never intended to be an entrepreneur. In all honesty, I ended up here because I could not find a job. I started a CRO, and in doing consulting projects through the CRO, I landed at this problem of bioinformatics and how can you accurately and very quickly deal with huge amounts of DNA. So I hope to bring a completely different perspective to what's been talked about tonight. I mentioned to Cameron and Arm during the break that I wish I had an hour to run out to my truck right now and redo my presentation because half of my questions have been answered after those first two.
Oh, good.
So,
good. Can we go? Can we?
Oh yeah, you're free. You can get out. Yeah. Though I do look forward to what comments you can bring to me because I have no sales background, no marketing background. You know, I'm a scientist that leapt from the tower and trying to essentially translate science to something useful. So what do I have? Long story made very short, I have a novel bioinformatics big data engine. We have the ability on one very small computer to crunch through terabytes of data in a matter of minutes. Most bioinformatic companies hear about now, they use thousands of computers on the cloud and it's very expensive and whatnot. We actually have reduced our technology to a shoebox, and I actually usually bring it with me, but one of the sales reps has it tonight. And within that shoebox is a miniature DNA sequencer and all of our technology. That shoebox, in under 8 hours, if you put a drop of blood in it, can identify the pathogen in your blood, so the bacteria or the virus that's currently making you sick, down to the subspecies. Also, in that blood is human DNA. From that human DNA, this box can identify the biomarkers in your genome that would indicate the best therapeutic to give you for that specific pathogen that's affecting you. So it's personalized medicine squared, right? So that's fun. So what does that mean though? So that's hard to get to, right? So those are the ones on the top left and right, the diagnostics and the therapeutic is the end goal of our technology. We want to sell that little box. We want it to be in every hospital, every PCP office, every walk-in clinic, just everywhere. You know, we want farmers in remote areas using it, the whole nine works. But that's going to take a while to get to, right? There's FDA regulations in about 3 different areas because of our setup. It's going to take millions of dollars and a few years to do that, right? And ideally, we'd also like it to half dispense the therapeutics as well, too. My brother has an idea for an ATM-style machine where on the street corner, you literally stick your finger in it, it pricks your finger like diabetes, like a diabetes test kit would, and then a few minutes later, a little pill box pops out and off you go. You know, fantastic. Obviously, that's going to take a while, right? So one of our questions was we started backpedaling to figure out what are some nice, slow, easy steps we can get there, right? Make it simple. And could we grow this organically? Could we, with a minimal round of investment, are there things we can sell now to then get to that endpoint? So we backpedaled, we say, okay, let's do veterinary diagnostics, right? So Fido or some giraffe at a circus can't tell you what's wrong. People put a lot of money into those animals. Can we sell that? FDA said, nope, in your case, we're gonna treat the animals the same as the humans. So we go, great, right? Backpedal a little more. Let's be a CLIA certified lab, right? So it'll be like a Quest Diagnostics. So you send us the blood, we deal with it all in-house, we give you a report. That's not too bad, but that still requires a decent amount of money and a few years, so still not ideal. So we backpedal it a little further, and the idea is, okay, what research could be benefited by this? What research can we accelerate with our underlying technology? And gene therapy came up. And for those of you who are not familiar with gene therapies, the basic idea is there's now several enzymes that if you build them correctly, you can put them in cells and they reprogram DNA. There's several uses of this coming up. One in particular, what are called CAR T cells, and this is, the initial use of this has been phenomenal. The basic idea is you take somebody's white blood cells out of them, reprogram the white blood cell, and put it back into the individual. Where they've had very good success with this is actually in cancer treatment. They've used this on about 10, essentially stage 4 terminal cancer patients, weeks away from death, at the point where it's, let's make them comfortable, full remission. Cancer's completely gone. In 8 out of the 10 cases. In the other 2 cases, things went very bad, right? And I'll bring that back around in a minute. So then, okay, basic research and development. We can help with that, right? We can now create the blueprints, right? So if we take your T cell, we can now figure out how it's currently programmed and tell you how to reprogram it such that it doesn't cause disasters in the human, right? Or if you're a pharmaceutical company, one of the ways you test your therapeutics are you take cells either from a hamster, what's called a CHO cell, or a clone of a human, what's called a HEK cell, and you try to incorporate more human components into its genome. And then you apply your therapeutic to it as early stage research, and you see if anything goes wrong. So also there, we can develop the blueprint and the design for how to incorporate all this in, and this is what Cameron was referring to, is more importantly that rather than having them with a better final design, we can help them fail incredibly fast. We can help them fail even before they get to animal models. So, by the time a pharmaceutical gets to an animal model, maybe they're 10 million to 50 million, maybe $100 million in. So, and then by the time you're at the end, you're usually at about $1 billion, right? So even saving them the time and the money before that means they can move on to other things. So how can we grab those cost savings and whatnot? So we did that. The best way to explain this without a 3-hour biology lecture is for years humans built buildings, right? They would take whatever materials they could find, they would create hammers, nails, they'd bang them together, and sometimes the building sort of worked, sometimes it worked great, sometimes it fell down, sometimes it caught on fire, right? And from that, we developed building codes and architects. We came up with building codes, which are the rules. Build the house this way so it doesn't fall down and it doesn't catch on fire and kill people. And from that came architects, people who understood the building codes, who understood the rules for how to build things, such that when someone came to them and said, I want a building that does this and looks like this, the architect says, here's the plan. And more so, as the building's built, the architect shows up and makes sure everything's going to plan and adjusts on the fly. The analogy here, gene therapy companies, such as our partner Transposigen Biopharmaceuticals, they're the builders. They're the ones with the wet labs who can go into the cells and reprogram the DNA. We are the architects. We are the ones who can figure out that initial blueprint, we can tell them how to build it, and then as they build it, we can go in and make sure it's being built correctly. And then more so afterwards, we can go back in again, essentially create another blueprint, and then verify what we wanted to happen would happen, right? And we do this through a variety of things. Up over here, the little green and yellow things, that's what's called an off-target analysis. So these gene therapies, you have to design them very specifically so they only affect the gene that you wish affected. Otherwise, it can go bad and you can kill your cells or the person. And we combine that into what we call a one-click biodesign system, right? So this is great. So you come to us, you say, we're working with this cell line, we want to change these genes to do this, how do we do it? And we come back and we say, blah, here's how you do it. And I built this whole system, part of which is this thing called the sandbox. And I said, great, now we have something to sell. We have a thing, so let's sell it. So we sold 2, and then nothing. Completely died. We sold 2 in March. Funny enough, we delivered on them March 17th, for those of you who are Irish in the room, the most holy of all days of the year, right? Went out, had a grand old time, woke up in rough shape the next morning, but still feeling pretty good about it, and then nothing for 2 months. So then we sat there going, what on earth happened, right? And for this part, I'm gonna tell you what I think happened, and I'm very looking forward to, am I anywhere near what happened, or am I completely, on the wrong planet? Here's what I think happened, right? I thought of this as like a lemonade stand, right? This one-click biodesign system I built was the lemonade. So as long as I set up this little stand and said 25 cents a cup, people were going to come by and buy it, right? Nope, right? What I've learned in the last 2 months is essentially that the deliverable is not the product, right? So the report I handed over to the customers was missing a lot of pieces, and that's why we only sold 2 and then nothing happens for 2 months. My understanding now of the product is there's knowledge of the deliverable. You can explain how does it work. There's validation, there's marketing, and then accessibility. And this is why I kind of like the lemonade stand example, because for a lemonade stand, all of those are known. The whole world knows what a lemonade stand is. You put it on the corner, everyone can see it. People have tasted lemonade before, so they know it's great. What we do is more complicated, and even scientists who work in the field, it can take some time to explain it to them, right? So there's several challenges here. And the one I want to harp on for 2 seconds is how does it work? When I first started speaking with people, this one confused me. They would ask me, how does it work? And I would jump right into a genetics lecture about how all these things go together. And these business people would be looking at me like I had 4 heads, right? Because that's not the question they were asking. The way I've come to understand it is to use the analogy of a radio, right? If you go into a store to buy a radio, you ask the salesperson, how does it work? And they don't tell you about fast Fourier transforms and crystal receivers and op-amp amplifiers and all this other stuff. They say, here's the on switch, here's the tuner, here's the volume, right? So after I realized that, things got a lot better, right? And once again, the lemonade stand is easy, right? Because you buy a glass of lemonade, you drink it, done and done, right? So then there was another key piece here, the missing link. Scientists got this. Even if they didn't fully understand the genomics or the genetics behind it, the scientists in the companies would say, I need that. That will save me 3 or 4 days of work. Right now it's a quick thing, and it's better information that they could get from publicly available websites and things of that sort. The issue was business people did not get it. The scientists understood how it would save them time and money. The business people did not understand how it relates to their overall product, to their overall finances and whatnot. So what we've been trying to learn how to do is custom tuning sales. So rather than charging into a company and saying, hey, we have this off-target analysis or this one-click biodesign system, it's now going the other way. It's now, what is a particular pharmaceutical company doing? What cell lines are they using to develop what therapeutics to do what? And then working that backwards to what are the kinks in their production chain? If the scientists can get this done a year faster, do the business people care about that, or are they just going to make the scientists spend another year testing even further? What is that? How do you bridge that connection? And then that overall solution becomes our current deliverable. However, I still do need a bunch of help with this step because it's probably fairly obvious. So, right. So to show you 2 quick things that we added that seem to help a lot is we came up with the how does it work slide, essentially, right? So it's very simple. There's the user steps, and this is what we actually show interested customers is it's very simple. You go into our website, you select a cell line, you select a gene or a region, and you hit go. And then what does our system do? It goes through those steps there. It identifies targets. It runs off target analysis. It compares them. It does a whole bunch of number crunching, and then comes back and tells you, here's the best design and the best way to do it. The other thing we did was on the range of validation, and oops, sorry, there's something hiding in the middle there, but oh well. Validation, that was one of the questions we received all the time. In the 1990s, bioinformaticists tried to solve this problem as well too, and they failed horribly. And the first question we get is, didn't people already try this and it didn't work? And the answer is yes. And then they ask, well, if it's garbage, if we can pay for garbage or use the free garbage online, why would we pay for the garbage, right? So then we had to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out, and it's probably nowhere near finalized yet, how do we explain to them that what we have is not garbage, where they're used to garbage? And this is some of the information we put together to counter that was basically us versus other very well-known and accepted techniques and how we relate to them. And since we've done that, yesterday morning we received 3 more orders, and then we're in discussions with another company for hopefully another 20. So then by the end of June, that will kick us up to about 25. And I'm sure there's much more ways to improve that. I'd be curious if people had any comments about how do we go from the 25 to, I don't know, 25,000 a year. And there's probably 100 pieces I'm missing, but I'm curious, so. And with that, I'm happy to entertain all critiques, improvements, and whatnot. And one last happy note, we are what's today, Tuesday? 6 days away from closing a Series A round, so we have money to actually implement and try any worthwhile suggestions and whatnot. So, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, so.
I'll let you go first.
All right.
I saw a lot of pens going over there. I'm a
Yeah,
little
so
nervous.
I took some notes, and the thing that, when you were talking about the scientists and the business people, and we talked about buyer personas earlier, here's something that I want you to keep in mind, and that is, there are user buyers, and there are users, and then there are buyers. In other words, there are the people that buy the product and the people that use it, and the scientists in this case are the users. The business people end up being the buyers, right? Users tend to buy products because of a pain.
Right.
Because they tend to look at it, like you said, they can do things quicker, they can do things more effectively. Buyers tend to look at it from a point of view of gain. So when you're talking to these folks, you have to take a completely different approach in terms of the kinds of information that you're trying to extract from them. I think you're doing that, right? I think you're doing that. I think with the other end of it is technology buyers versus economic buyers, right? So always kind of think about the persona and how they probably are feeling pain or gain or fear. The fear piece is going to come in when you do sell a few more, and then the competition to your clients start to say, well, how are they doing this? Their fear is going to be, we're going to be left out if we're not, if we're not delivering on this.
Well, and actually, maybe a question I can interject in there is, so something interesting, so a larger one of our customers, like one of the global pharmaceuticals, it's almost backwards. Do you think that might be the easier one because they're larger, the scientists get excited even quicker, and they have more money, but there seems to be that bigger buyer-user disconnect. Whereas in the smaller ones, now you have the buyer and user might be the same person because the scientist is also the, I don't know, the CFO or something like that, right? There was a question in there, sorry. Yeah.
In those larger accounts, I think some of the issue in the larger accounts is exactly that. They're larger, they're disconnected from one another, and sometimes the vendor has to play the role of connector, right? It's odd because sometimes the person selling the product to a large account has to actually bring people together from the different parts of the company that have probably never met or haven't spent a lot of time together.
Get them in the same room,
kind of thing. If you can spend the time doing that. Now, it's even more effective if you can find someone who will champion your cause internally, and they become the connector internally, because obviously a business buyer and a technology buyer from a large company are more likely to come together if someone from their company tells them they need to be in the same room. But you can begin playing that role and kind of referencing different people that you've met. I mean, ultimately, the best way to make a sale like this is to get everyone in the room at the same time and handle it all at once. That's hard to do.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's something we're not doing, is we get the scientists excited and then say, hey, can you email whoever, and have them email us or something. So.
Right. Always take control of the
I know. Like I said, no sales background.
Always take control of the conversation, right? I mean, that's,
A couple of comments I have is just one on the messaging piece, a little bit what Jim talked about, is that you got to understand the audience of that message and really tailor that message to that audience. Because if you're talking at it sounds like you were talking at a scientist level to the buyer persona, and they weren't getting it.
Right.
And like you say, in my mind, when we were talking about it having our sandwich earlier, I mean, it was going way over my head. So, I mean, really, the best that you can do to each audience to kind of really put it in layman's terms and simplify it, and really drive at the outcomes for each persona or each audience, that's going to help you push that along. Everyone's favorite radio station is what, WIIFM? And that's what's in it for me. So you really have to, you really have to tailor your message to understand what those key outcomes are going to be. And not fully understanding your product, the complexity of it, I'm assuming there could be a huge value in just the interpretation of the results. I don't know if you've bundled that into a package and added, there could be additional revenue stream in just the consulting on how, what you do with those results and how you interpret that for the account. I'm not sure if you're just handing off the results and there you go, but I mean, it could be a billable type service.
So for the initial thing we're selling right now, it's essentially a hands it off. If you have any questions, get a hold of us, we'll answer them. For the next one that we're going to release in July, there's more of that. So there's going to be a back and forth because there'll be a few phases to it.
Right.
But one of the big things I did learn tonight was following up after a sale. I had no idea about that, so we'll have to.
See, that's where the consulting would come in. It's almost like you make that another link in the chain, that's part of your process, that there will be this follow-up. So, because once again, you want to cement that this is something totally new,
Right.
So you want to make sure, a lot of companies that are good at this, they follow up, and then they make sure that they're using it correctly, because if they're not using it correctly, they're going to say, oh, you know.
Right, how does
Yeah,
this-
yeah, they're going to bail, so.
Gotcha, okay. Gotcha, so just digesting.
You know, one other thing I think would be very effective from a promotional sort of communications point of view is doing a lot more of what I said earlier to Paul, which is becoming a thought leader in the space, not just around the solution that you sell, but in general in terms of you've become an expert in this area of failing fast with the research, right? So, you know, have you written articles? Do you have a blog? Do you seek out, again, trade associations or organizations to go speak and do these kinds of presentations to? Because that will attract clientele, right?
Right, because then the exposure.
It breaks through the noise. If you kind of, you know, is there a book that could be written about this somehow?
That's a great idea.
Probably,
You
right?
know,
Yeah.
because that's, I mean, those,
That's
you
a
know, this,
great idea.
I have an old friend who I've worked with over the years, and his entire business is around creating thought leaders. He helps people write articles and books. He helps people get speaking engagements. He helps people do primary research. So here's something, you know, where you can bring some fresh thinking into the space. If you can do even some interviews that you can do with some of the folks that are using the product now to get a more robust story to tell around it, leveraging PR and news, and then social media, which is always sort of the big pillar nowadays.
Right.
But you start to do all those things, but you don't do any one of those things for itself. In other words, you don't write a book because you're going to get rich on the book. You
Right.
write a book because then it's like, here's Kringle, published author, expert in this area. Don't you want to talk to him? He started a company that does this. Oh my God, we got to spend time with him. You know?
Right.
And I think you could do that. I think, you know, you've got the personality to be able to do that. Which,
So,
you know,
thank you, sir.
I think it'd be great if you gave that a shot. But start small. Start with some trade associations where you can go speak about the issues that the companies you're working with are facing and how this type of technology can help.
Okay.
You know?
No, that makes sense, thank you, so.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right.
Absolutely.
I have a question about, with a buyer in a bigger company, in my experience, there could easily be a political
Absolutely.
influence for that big buyer who's disassociated with the user.
Right.
Who's going to get ahead and how am I going to make myself a hero out of this? I don't know, how would you discuss that point?
Well, I think, you know, when I talked about the pain chain earlier, this is where it comes into play, which is, you know, the more people you can identify in a complex organization that are involved, even tangentially in the decision, the more likely you are to find someone who will benefit greatly if they adopt your solution, right? And turn them into the internal champion. The folks that are going to fight it from a political point of view, there's not much you can do to change them other than try to find an angle that makes them look good internally. I mean, unfortunately, that's the way it works, right? But what's in it for me is what rules, right? People buy based on emotion and they justify with logic. And so the more people you meet, the better job you do in terms of getting involved with other people. You know, even if there's opportunities to offer free workshops, you know, inside some of these larger companies, just to meet more and more of these people, I think it's part of it.
Gotcha. I actually just remember what my question about the
Yeah.
big versus small one is.
Yeah.
So the small one where the user and the buyer might be the same thing, the large company, they're separated.
Right.
So one of the thoughts we had was approaching the larger companies with more of a project setup as opposed to just individual sales. Is that something that would work better there, or are there downsides to that, or?
So approach them more of like a consulting engagement as a project?
Or-
larger ones?
Right, or yeah, or a bunch of things bundled together to one big task,
Right.
saying we're gonna, for this specific thing, we're gonna get you all the way through this,
Right.
or something of that sort.
So the answer to that, I think, is to ask the question to the
Okay.
larger buyers and say,
Right.
you know,
How do you want it to look?
How do you want it to look? How do you want to buy this product?
Right.
You know, I think
Okay.
sometimes we're afraid to ask that because we're afraid they'll say, I don't want to buy it at all. That's
Right.
bad, right? But I think what you'll find often is, you know what, it's a lot easier for me to sell it internally if we sell it as a project, not as a product or as a deliverable, you know. And the smaller companies might just say, look, it's just easier for me if I do it on a subscription basis.
Sure.
Right? That's something you should think about as well, just offering it as a
And
subscription.
here's where these detailed conversations come in, because the more that you engage them in this, you know, packaging the solution and how they want it to look, a lot of times is if you put together an initial proposal, you may want to put draft on the top. and
let
say, well,
them choose
here's
it.
some of the ideas. I want to have a discussion with you, and let's work on this together and make it into something that makes sense for both of us. So the more you get your prospect engaged in that process,
Mhm.
then it's something that you both can work with, and it brings them, sucks them into that, making that buying decision with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you.